Welcome to The Proof is Out There. In our first video tonight, prepare yourself for a ride through the wilds of Indonesia as a group of motorcycle riders have an unexpected run-in. This is Aceh, Indonesia, located on the northwest tip of the island of Sumatra. It's known for its rugged terrain, steaming volcanoes, and now this. It's an unidentified figure. The sight so startling it causes one of these dirt bike riders to wipe out. The others pursue it. It darts into the tall grass and disappears. Now, if we slow this down and freeze it, we see a small figure carrying something. Because of its small stature, there's speculation the bikers caught sight of a legendary being called the Orang Pendek. Field researcher Cliff Barrickman heads the Orang Pendek project.
Orang Pendek are two Indonesian words that translate to short man.
He's conducted an expedition to search for the creature in Sumatra. It's described as small with a compact, muscular build like a boxer's.
The arms are longer in proportion to their legs than what would be found in humans. So this is just another species of ape, basically, that's out there. And they don't seem to have any language ability or anything like that. And all of their behaviors point to something like an orangutan, except for one strange thing. They walk on two legs. Maybe not 100% of the time, but let's say habitually.
Credible sightings date back to at least the 1920s, though the creature's existence has not been confirmed. This is the cast of an alleged Orang Pendek footprint, which one primate biologist said was a blend of chimp, gibbon, orangutan, and human. So what do you think we have here? Is this evidence of the mythical Orang Pendek, or is it something or someone else? Our experts are anxious to dive into the mystery. First up, forensic video analyst Michael Primo. He wants to know if this video is legit.
Had this been computer generated or inserted in the video, I would expect to see some indication of that.
One of the tests Primo uses is called a motion vector analysis.
The activity is almost too smooth to be faked. The way that the motorcyclists crashed, responded, reacted to the crash, and then continued on pursuit, the timing of the way that this figure was traveling on foot, it all seemed to be real to me.
So the video is not altered, but is it really an Orang Pendek? Next, anthropologist Kathy Strange says she initially thought the video could be a game changer.
There are these stories about Orang Pendek, and so at first when I saw that, I went, did they finally get this on film?
But here's the issue. The Orang Pendek is covered in fur. This figure has some hair, but has a noticeable bald spot on his buttocks.
It appears to be hairless, and so there are no eyewitness accounts where an Orang Pendek isn't noted to have very long hair on them.
So what or who is it? Biologist Lucy Eggersley has another theory. Could it be a prehistoric relative of early man, somehow still alive today?
Maybe this is a relic of Homo floresiensis. In 2003, in the island of Flores, in a small cave, a remarkable discovery was found of a hominid species that looked very similar to humans, but stood around 3 feet tall.
While the so-called Flores man lived on this Indonesian island around 50,000 years ago, in recent years, natives have reported seeing a hobbit-like person that comes down from the caves and steals from them. But Eckersley says the body type of the figure in the video doesn't quite match.
What we see in this video seems to be a thin and small Homo sapien. It doesn't look like the stocky build that I would expect to see in Homo floresiensis or any of our other extinct relatives.
Another, more likely theory?
It's possible that this could be a member of the Mante tribe. They are a lost tribe of Sumatra who are known to have lived in these areas, and they are essentially uncontacted by the rest of the human world. They are quite small compared to the average of what you would see in this area of the world.
In fact, the Ministry of Social Affairs in Indonesia is now trying to find more information about this lost tribe.
If that is a member of the Mante tribe, That would be one of the most important scientific finds in the last 50 years, easily.
Okay, after all that, here's where we're landing. The video is real. Despite worldwide speculation, the person in the video is not an Orang Pendek or a Flores man. Our verdict? A Manti tribesman, one of only 100 tribes in the world that are still uncontacted. He might have much to teach us, but perhaps is best left alone. It's December 2011 in Pyongyang, North Korea. Supreme Leader Kim Jong-il has just died at the age of 70, and the whole country has fallen into a period of ritual mourning. During a 3-hour funeral procession through the capital, throngs of civilians and North Korean soldiers stand in rows, dozens deep, to watch Kim's casket pass by. But after the Associated Press releases an overhead shot of the crowd, some eagle-eyed viewers notice something seems amiss.
There's a man in an army uniform who seems to literally be twice as tall as everyone else.
As we zoom in closer, it appears this soldier is about 8 feet tall. And what makes this soldier even more remarkable is that in North Korea, where famine is frequent, men are not known for their height.
North Korean soldiers are somewhat shorter than average than South Korean soldiers, and it's probably because of poor nutrition that they have.
Kim Jong-il himself often wore platform shoes to compensate for his short stature.
The average male height is around 5 feet, 4 inches, or even shorter than that.
Bear in mind also that the North Korean government is notorious for photoshopping images for propaganda purposes. Check out these soldiers at a sunset ceremony. Who needs shadows? Or this image of a thriving farm. Note the cloned sheep. And look at this impressive North Korean bakery. Plenty to eat here. And the workers can even stack the loaves in identical piles.
North Koreans are world-renowned for their propaganda and their hyperbole and their exaggeration. So it wouldn't be at all surprising if they tried to slip something in, like we have incredibly tall soldiers.
Another theory? The photo is real, and the regime is actually engineering super soldiers in a secret lab.
A lot of people speculated that maybe there was some kind of experimentation that was happening that would have created a super soldier. In 2020, a report came out that stated that China was actually using CRISPR technology to genetically modify its own soldiers, to turn them into, essentially, super soldiers. A person without regret, without pain, without compassion, without fear.
CRISPR technology is like a set of molecular scissors that researchers can use to cut and alter DNA sequences.
Some have speculated that maybe because North Korea is China's neighbor and they're allies, North Korea is using it secretly as well.
The Korean People's Army is the second largest military organization in the world. Enlistment is compulsory, and a whopping 30% of the country's population is serving in some capacity. We all know they have nukes, but could this really be the country's new secret weapon? First, let's handle the fake or real question.
I think the first thing that leaps to mind is this is just an editing glitch. They've duplicated soldiers, and then when they copied one, they accidentally made it a bit too big.
But let's think about this for a second. It seems off that North Korea would have to duplicate images of soldiers. Unlike loaves of bread, they've got infantrymen in abundance. And when West examines the tall man's uniform, he spots revealing details.
Compare it to the others, and you see that the uniform is actually a bit different. It's got this kind of longer coat that comes down further down on his legs. And it doesn't really seem like it's a small person that's been magnified into a large person. It seems like what we actually have here is actually a very large soldier.
So if this is a real person, could he truly be a super soldier? Military expert Tim McMillan says that might not make much sense, since extreme height could be a disadvantage in the field.
For one, if you're going to be used in a ground combat situation, you're a much better target than your contemporaries who are shorter than you and lower to the ground.
People say the ideal range of heights for a soldier is around 6'2", and there's very practical reasons for that. You can't fit into troop transports if you're 8 feet tall.
So if this isn't a super soldier, who could be that naturally tall? West concludes there's one man it could possibly be.
It's almost certainly the North Korean basketball player, Rim Yong-hoon. It matches him very well. His general shape, his shoulders, the shape of his head, and just the way he stands.
But why is a basketball player in military garb? Well, after the U.S. State Department initially denied the 7-foot 8-inch tall basketball star's request to play in the NBA, North Korea honored Ri with a position in the military. The verdict? This is most likely North Korea's tallest man, Ri Myung-hoon. As to why he's so tall when North Koreans are shorter on average, well, that remains a mystery. It's possible Ri has gigantism, which is generally caused when the pituitary gland releases excess growth hormone in childhood. A quick warning that some viewers might find the following images disturbing. We're in Jambi, Indonesia. A father at a local bike shop is working as his kids play in front. Then, without warning, the family finds themselves in the path of fatal danger. Watch again. Let's slow it down and freeze. This appears to be the moment Dad senses the car, and in about 0.78 seconds, he springs into action and pulls the children to safety. Incredible. Similar displays of incredible parental reflexes have popped up recently, like in this video from Vietnam in 2019. Just watch that again. The woman is knocked off the motorbike, but still has the presence of mind to grab this child just before she's crushed by the oncoming truck. It's almost too fast to measure. Author Alexis Brooks says it might not just be fast reflexes at work here, but the power of premonition.
One of the theories that has been postulated by noted author Dr. Larry Dossey says that we all essentially have a premonition instinct, but particularly in the case of parents, where there is a unique bond with the child, premonitions can be even more likely.
But even if these parents had a premonition of danger, it's even more astonishing how quickly their bodies were able to react in a fraction of a second.
It's said that typically we only access a portion of our power, perhaps about 65%. But there is a phenomenon called hysterical strength.
There are dozens of anecdotal stories of humans in a moment of panic, summoning extraordinary strength to lift cars or other extremely heavy objects off of trapped individuals, including a mother in Georgia in 1982 who lifted a Chevy Impala off her trapped son.
When something is happening so quick, where there's no time to react, there is a rush of adrenaline that pushes us to do the unfathomable. And I think that might be something that we saw here.
Look, scientists are divided on the existence of this phenomena because it's nearly impossible to test emergency situations in a controlled lab. However, these videos might be proof of either parental ESP or superhuman reflexes. To be sure, we call in the experts.
Although it's entirely possible and conceivable to manipulate events like this using sophisticated software, technology, I don't see or detect any evidence to support that that's what was done here.
So the video is legit, but physicist Michio Kaku doubts it's proof of a premonition.
Sometimes we have premonition that an accident will happen, and then sometimes it does, in which case you think that maybe you're psychic. Most premonitions are false alarms, but 1 time out of 10, maybe it does prepare you for an emergency. So this ability of ours to, quote, predict the future by having a premonition is very selective. We forget all the misses.
So if this wasn't the result of a true premonition, perhaps these lightning-fast reflexes are related to hysterical strength.
Usually when you perform something, your prefrontal cortex acts as a check and says, slow down, do it this way, do it that way. However, in an emergency, where split-second decisions have to be made, a lot of the prefrontal cortex's decisions are overruled. All of a sudden, you take risks. Yes, muscles will tear. Yes, you're going to suffer damage, but you do it anyway because the adrenaline says you can do it.
Our verdict. While we can't prove or disprove these parents had a premonition, it was certainly adrenaline that gave them extraordinary reflexes at just the right time. It's March 2016, and the streets of Bogotá, Colombia are swarming with traffic. So it's no surprise that a group of bystanders on a bridge started screaming when they saw this. Journalist Chrissy Elliott had the same reaction.
Oh my God. I was like, what is this guy doing? He dodges between vehicles, he lies underneath them, and then he just prances off.
Look again. The daredevil pedestrian seems to possess cat-like reflexes. Might there be a strain of superhumans with this kind of quickness?
It takes about a quarter of a second for a human reflex to react. 250 milliseconds. But there are people whose reaction time is even faster than that.
People like speed shooter Bob Munden, who holds 18 world records. He's been clocked hitting a target and replacing the gun in his holster within 175 milliseconds.
And this guy, if this is real, his reaction time must be on the next level.
Perhaps something else is going on here. Dodging traffic doesn't just take skill, it takes will.
There are about 400 known cases of something called Urbach-Wyeth disease. And what it does is it withers away at your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that is responsible for fear. So could this guy who's cartwheeling through traffic have this disease?
So we have two things to explain here. The traffic dodger's lightning-quick reflexes and his foolhardy fearlessness. Our investigation begins not with the person, but with the footage itself, as we turn to forensic video analyst Mick West.
What was strange to me was not simply how daring this was, but the fact that all the cars ignored him. They weren't actually slowing down or trying to stop or avoid him.
West's first impression tells him this traffic dodger may not be what he seems. But what clues are in the video?
What I often look at in analyzing videos is the lighting and the shadows.
We can see the whole setup. There's this pole here, and then there's this power pole, and this is what's casting the shadows in the road. So we know that that's an actual shadow, and that's the shadow of the power pole. So that should be obscured by the cars when they go by the buses.
But watch closely as the bus approaches. Two shadows appear to exist in the same place.
Now, shadows don't add together like that. If something is a shadow and then something else shadows it, it eliminates the first shadow because light doesn't go through things twice.
Which means that this isn't a real shadow. This is something that's been added. It's kind of been overlaid on top.
That's not all West finds. Take a look as this guy lays down in the street.
This car really doesn't look like it's big enough to go over him. And I actually looked up the model of the car. It's a Renault Twingo. Small car, and the ground clearance is just under 7 inches. So it's about that much, which is impossible for someone to fit their head in something that's 150 millimeters.
So it turns out seeing isn't believing. Well, then how'd he do it? West says the camera was locked down at one position on the bridge.
There'd be no traffic. So he would just wait until there was a gap in the traffic. He would run out, do his stuff, and then get to the other side.
Then by combining the solo acrobatics with another shot of oncoming traffic and some staged screaming, you have one seemingly incredible superhuman.
All these add up to it being a forgery.
We contacted the creator of this video, and he told us there's no problem with his brain's amygdala. He fears danger just like the rest of us, but he did confirm one thing. This video is two different versions combined with digital effects and an extraordinary imagination. Looks like we haven't found a superhuman just yet. It's May 26, 2018 in Paris, France. Lebanese chef Tarek Dandash is getting his hair cut in the city's 18th arrondissement when he hears a big commotion and runs out to the street.
وايش لقيت انه الطفل كان مدندن حاله حيوقع. انا يعني لا شعوريا سحبت التليفون وبدات اتصور. يعني كان هدفي من التصوير.
Suddenly, a Malian immigrant named Mamadou Gassama leaps into action.
ولكن لما شفت هالشجاع البطل مامادو طلع شاعر بخوف هستيري. اثنين هستيري انه يسمح الله يوقع مامادو او يوقع هالطفل كمان.
Mamadou swiftly makes it all the way up to the 4th floor. Then, with the help of a man standing on the next balcony, he pulls the toddler up to safety before the boy's grip gives way.
يعني كمان كان عم يحاول التضحية بنفسه مامادو لينقذ الطفل.
Let's take another look at the video. See how Mamadou seems to launch his body so he can grab onto the rail. Incredible. Of course, free solo climbers can scale sheer rock faces and even skyscrapers, but that requires extensive training and preparation. So how did Mamadou, an everyday guy, instantly acquire such exceptional abilities? Could he be naturally hardwired to put himself at risk for others? Turns out there's a theoretical condition called super altruism.
We have super altruists among us, those who really put themselves at risk or who exert a tremendous amount of energy for some other individuals or some cause they truly believe in.
This instinct towards super altruism seems to be strongest when trying to save the most vulnerable, like children. So does Mamadou have this amazing selflessness of a super altruist, some extraordinary agility, or both? Let's go to our experts.
This guy here is obviously very athletic. You can see that he's able to reach up very high to the next balcony, but he's just free soloing. He's going up there without any kind of safety. He's not even hesitating.
Yet remarkably, Mamadou claims to have no climbing experience. So could this ascent be fueled strictly by adrenaline?
Superhuman strength is also called hysterical strength by scholars, and it is thought to occur during life or death situations, and it's a short period of time in which humans appear to have this surge of extra strength, and it is often attributed to a rush of adrenaline that flows into the blood.
In interviews, Mamadou confirms that after the rescue, he was so afraid he was shaking, a sure sign of an adrenaline rush. But back to that theory, are some folks hardwired to do stuff like this?
There could be an altruism gene, a gene that protects not just your children and your genes, but a gene that protects your group, your tribe, your people, to make sure that their genes can propagate into the next generation.
Mamadou himself later offered his own explanation. He said his faith in God gave him both the courage and the strength. So we showed the footage to Catholic miracle researcher and engineer Michael O'Neill.
Perhaps it was God giving him the inspiration to put his own life on the line and to save this child. He was truly inspired to take this altruism to a whole new level.
And though O'Neill doesn't believe this inspired incident meets the criteria of an official Catholic miracle, he does say acts like this can be considered saintly.
There's a new path to canonization proposed by Pope Francis called oblatio vitae, or the sacrifice of one's own life. This is a classic example of that this man, out of love for a stranger, he was willing to risk his own life. Throughout Christian history, the sacrifice of one's life is what it's all about.
Our verdict? Mamadou's faith led him to this act of super altruism. His physique enabled him to start the daring climb with no experience, and adrenaline gave him a boost to pull it off. Though whether there's a super altruism gene, that's still a mystery. It's March 2022 in Western Thailand. A family is gathered around the bedside of a figure that barely looks alive. The man is a monk named Luang Pho Ayai, and he is very much alive. Look again. His skeletal figure and desiccated skin make it hard to believe this video is real, but it is.
Some people who've seen this video have wondered if this is the oldest man who has ever lived, guessing that his age is over 150 years old.
For the record, the oldest documented person in history was Jean Calment, who was born in 1875 and died in 1997 at an amazing 122 years old. So 150 years old would be a huge jump. But scientists say where a person lives can have an effect on how long they live.
Researchers are fascinated by so-called blue zones, which are geographical areas with a larger than average number of people who are 100 years old. By contrast, the average life expectancy in the United States is only 77 years old. Could the man in this video be benefiting from one of these so-called blue zones?
These blue zones don't share many similarities when it comes to geography, so their connection to longevity remains a mystery. But there's another possible explanation, a theory that some people can mummify themselves.
What this video brings to mind is the supposed Japanese practice of soku shinbutsu, which is the practice of self-mummification. Self-mummification is meditating so deeply that you pass away in that meditative state, becoming a preserved body. The practice is believed to have been observed by Buddhist monks who would practice a form of such extreme asceticism that their bodies would simply mummify themselves.
According to Atlas Obscura, between 1081 and 1903, at least 17 monks managed to mummify themselves. Is that astonishing ability what we're seeing here? The act of self-mummification was criminalized in Japan during the late 1800s as it was deemed inhumane by the government. So has this man revived the practice, or is he mastering some other form of self-preservation? We asked our experts. Could this man be gaining extended life by residing in one of the world's seemingly magical blue zones? Biologist Stephanie Menke says that's an easy no.
Being in a blue zone is not a factor that allows him to live this long. This is in Thailand. It's not in one of the blue zone areas.
So could we be looking at a real example of self-mummification in action? Menke is doubtful.
I don't think we're seeing self-mummification here. You know, that his skin has gone through a lot over time and his muscles have broken down and he's just aged. It appears he has plans to become cremated after he passes, so he's not attempting to become a shoku shinbutsu.
Menke believes this may be nothing more than a determined monk using a trained, focused mind to prolong the inevitable.
Your mind can actually have a great influence over your health. There's studies where monks have been able to actually change their internal core temperature by several degrees of Fahrenheit just through meditative states. I definitely think that mind over matter could have helped him live this long because he's been able to keep his stress so low, likely because of meditating.
Emergency physician Ed Hope thinks Luong's appearance and his advanced age, whatever it is, have to do with how much he eats.
Luong probably has a very modest diet, and he probably avoids some of those other things that might speed aging up, such as smoking and drinking alcohol.
Research backs up the hypothesis that calorie restriction slows down the aging process, but it can't prevent inevitable muscle breakdown known as sarcopenia.
So sarco means muscle and penia means a reduction of. So we're seeing a reduction of muscle mass. The cells he produces now aren't as good as the cells he's produced before. And that's why he's got this very frail appearance.
However, Hope says another factor might play an even bigger role here.
A human can only live so long, and that's really going to be defined by your personal genetics. He's certainly benefiting from good genetics as well. Not everyone, even if you live a very healthy life, will live as long as Luong here. The woman that's lived the longest, Jean Calmet, a French woman who lived to the age of 122, actually must have benefited from very good genetics because she was smoking all the way up to age 117.
And as far as Luong being the oldest living man at 150 years old, we dug into it. Ends up that's just a rumor that caught fire on the internet.
Sadly, Luong passed away due to advanced age at the age of 107.
Our verdict? We agree that what we are seeing is a man who extended his lifespan through disciplined eating and who benefited from good genetics. And while it ends up the rumors of Luong's life were greatly exaggerated, his surprising success on TikTok has, in a way, granted him a form of internet immortality. May 2021, Canadian resident Rob connects with Chris from Utah on a video chat. The two met on a Facebook group that explores the idea of possible extrasensory powers. Chris claims to have one particularly shocking ability.
There you go.
With a piece of foil on one finger, Chris holds up a light bulb and presses the end, and suddenly is able to make it light up without any wires.
Turn it all around everywhere so people can see there's nothing anywhere. Perfect.
The two got together to talk to us.
I was skeptical. I got him to take his camera and show it all around because I was wondering if there was some kind of a static generator or a Tesla coil, but there wasn't.
Chris says this extraordinary ability was taught to him by a man in South America who honed this power through years of meditation.
We're like a capacitor or a battery. That's what my teacher taught me. All I'm doing is I'm gathering an abundance of negative ions from the atmosphere and charging my body with it. So I create a voltage differential. And so what you're seeing most of it is static discharge.
Now, does that hurt, Chris?
Oh, it drains.
It's physical exercises like moving his muscles in a certain way, breathing a certain way, and it creates a charge. It pulls negative ions out of the air. So the negative ions in his body are going through the bulb, lighting it up, and then they pass on their way to ground and discharge to the ground. You know, it's really just about physics.
Now, the average human produces about 100 watts of electricity at rest, but we generally lack the ability to focus that energy into a consistent current. So how is Chris able to do this? Let's ask the experts. So, of course, our first question, is this just a clever trick? Mick West thinks the answer is yes.
He's actually got a little bit of foil on the end of one finger. If you look at a regular light bulb, you see it's got one contact in the middle and then the other contact where the screws are. And electricity normally flows across those. But if you stick a battery and a small bulb inside the light bulb, you can actually create a trick light bulb that will light up when touching a bit of aluminum foil to the two contacts. And I think that's all that's going on here.
But maybe that's not how the trick's done.
Wow.
Dr. Hakeem Olushehi says it may be possible he's not collecting ions from the air, but that he's conducting the electricity coming from somewhere else.
Our bodies are 50% water, and the water in our bodies is a pretty good conductor of electricity. The body can hold a voltage if he's directly connected to a source of power, and he can transfer that voltage to the bulb, causing it to illuminate.
It's not out of the question, then, that Chris is hoaxing us by hooking himself up to a low-voltage current.
Contact, yeah.
But even a small sustained amount could have damaging effects.
A current going through your body, particularly if it goes through the heart, it'll upset the heart's rhythms. So the first question may be, how are they surviving this?
Ow!
When we talked to Chris and Rob, they insisted no wires or trick bulbs were involved, and even demonstrated this power in a new way.
Let me hold your hand, okay? And I'm gonna take the bulb and I'm gonna touch it to the ground of the table. There it is. There we go. If you look around the table, there's nothing attached to the table. There's nothing attached to Chris. It's not a trick light bulb. I can't make it go on by touching it. No way, no how. But if I grab his hand, then I can do it. Ow!
Our experts were pretty convinced this was a hoax, but even though we weren't with Chris and Rob in person, their demonstration was pretty convincing. Since we can't explain how he's doing it, we're gonna call this an unexplained trick. It's November 2nd, 2021, 2 days after Halloween. Luca Batta is driving his delivery truck down a residential street in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee. Suddenly, he sees something that makes him pump the brakes, take out his smartphone, and film this.
Hey, so out making deliveries, and what is this? Look, it's just floating.
Something appears to be floating 30 feet in the air all by itself. And take a closer look. Is that a broom? Luca gets out of his car to investigate.
Seriously, it's just floating.
What could this be? Luca soon uploads his video to TikTok searching for answers. And according to author Alexis Brooks, everybody has an opinion.
There were plenty of comments, everything from amazement to this was a hoax. But Luca maintains that this was an authentic video. It had no photoshopping or whatever.
Could it be the time of year that explains this strange phenomenon?
There are many people who believe very strongly in ritualistic practices, and this is right around Halloween. It wouldn't surprise me necessarily if maybe there was some, let's just call them experiments going on with those that practice witchcraft.
The earliest known image of a witch on a broom dates to 1451 in a French manuscript. And some anthropologists theorize the link between witches and brooms could be rooted in pagan fertility ritual.
This is something that is quite common, though it's not talked about. That doesn't mean it's not practiced.
In the Wiccan religion, a besom, which is a broom made out of twigs tied around a stick, is said to be used as an instrument of purification to cleanse a space for rituals. Now, whether or not any spells were used to keep this broomstick in our video afloat, that's for our experts to decide. We begin with forensic video analyst Michael Primo. Though Luca denies it, could this video be faked?
When the user zooms into this object from inside of his vehicle, the depth of field between the smudging on the windshield and the object is significantly different and thus is not a result of some sort of camera artifacting. So the object is there. No evidence of any kind of photoshopping or CGI was detected.
Next, we take the video to meteorologist Juan Hernandez. Perhaps the weather is a key factor. Are we really looking at a kite?
The way that the solar radiation comes into the Earth drives a lot of the processes in the atmosphere that could potentially lead to some minor changes in weather, potential geomagnetic storms that can create enough electromagnetism to cause power outages. So the sun does cause different kinds of phenomena, but not this floating broomstick. Taking a look at the wind observations from Nashville that day, winds generally were between 5 to 10 miles an hour.
The average kite can take flight in winds of at least 5 miles per hour. But Hernandez says despite the optimal conditions, he sees a problem.
When we look at a flying kite, you'll see that kite move to the left, move to the right, descend or ascend. The witch's broomstick is stationary. There's no movement, which rules out the presence of a kite.
But wait, is it possible for an object to float by itself in midair? Believe it or not, physicist Matthew Shadaga says it is.
So levitation does exist in real life. It relies on something called superconductivity. And we do it all the time in laboratories. And you can find all kinds of videos online, people using superconductors and levitating them over a track.
But Shadagas also says there's a catch.
Superconductors need to be near the magnetic surface. They're talking a few inches away, not tens of feet, as in this video. And it only works at cold temperatures. Liquid nitrogen temperatures. It's definitely not more than 100 degrees below zero in this video.
So what do we have here? Shadagas has a theory.
The fact that Luca drove under the broom and it continued to float tells me it's not supported then from below, but probably horizontal.
And Shadagas believes that support came from a fishing line.
A fishing line is very thin and very hard to see, especially from a great distance. You can use fishing line to suspend objects, and that's how special effects, in fact, were done in Hollywood movies before we had CGI. And it was only a few days after Halloween. Therefore, I imagine this was just a Halloween prank, and a very good one at that, I would say.
Now, interestingly, we called Luca, and he told us there were trees around, but none of them were tall enough to attach a fishing line to. And he didn't see any light or telephone poles either. So, our verdict? We're gonna say hoax, but a pretty clever one. In fact, Luca said the broom later disappeared, suggesting someone moved on to Thanksgiving decorations. It's March of 2011. Scott Carpenter, a systems administrator for a small software company in East Tennessee, is conducting Bigfoot research in his spare time when his trail camera records this mysterious footage. It's a tough angle, but look at the upper left corner of the screen. Missed it? Scott himself didn't notice it until he got home and reviewed the footage. Then he made this enhanced magnification, and here, it seems like you can make out a dog-like head bobbing between the tree branches.
The movement caught my eye. You could literally see the nostrils opening and closing as it was taking breaths. And I did some research, called some people, and described what I had, and they're like, that's a Dogman.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt explains that while Dogman encounters are relatively new, reports seem to be increasing rapidly.
There are popular podcasts where eyewitnesses will come on and tell about their stories or accounts or encounters. The encounters are often very chilling. Dogman is often seen feasting on roadkill. It chases and claws at automobiles as they go by. It's an utterly terrifying creature, whatever it is.
The Dogman craze traces back to Michigan. A local legend about the half-man, half-hound first caught fire in 1987 and then blew up again in 2007 when a man named Micah Grusa recorded this now famous footage known as the Gable film. It starts out like an unremarkable home video, but then shows a creature crawling on all fours, then standing erect, and finally charging the cameraman.
The legend of the Dogman made people afraid to go into the woods. And I'm sure many 10-year-olds were scared to death by parents retelling the story around a campfire.
Now here's the thing. Micah Grusa has always been upfront about the fact that the Gable film was a hoax. That's Mike himself in a costume running at the camera. Pretty impressive that the dude can move like that on all fours. But the phenomenon of reported Dogman sightings is very real, and Scott Carpenter swears his footage is proof positive. So what do our experts think? First, we took the footage to anthropologist Kathy Strain. She says that if true, reports of the Dogman describe different behavior from what we see here.
Dogman is thought to be extremely aggressive, and if you're in their space, they will do everything possible to get you out of their space, including running you down. The video, I don't believe, shows a Dogman because it would have tried to run Scott out of the area.
That prompted us to analyze the video more closely. And our main man, Michael Primo, saw nothing hinky with the source footage. But when he inspected Scott's enhanced magnifications, the pixels told a different story.
This recording has undergone some sort of change. The operator essentially stabilized this part of the video image and then applied what's called pixel interpolation or zooming. And I'm seeing symptoms of that here. Information may have been added to make something look subjectively better, but not objectively accurate. Based on the analysis that I've performed, I cannot authenticate these images, and I'm concerned about the opportunity to manipulate these pixels to represent something that wasn't originally recorded.
Since Scott Carpenter's enhanced videos cannot be considered reliable evidence, we are going to have to conclude this is a hoax. While the Gable film video and images like these may capture the imagination of those who want to believe in Dogman, the rest of us will just have to keep sniffing around for proof.